Rome was perhaps one of the most powerful empires of its time. They were able to conquer the entire Mediterranean Sea, despite opposition from the Persians and other forces. However, in the 3rd and 4th centuries, Rome began to fall to many conflicts. The population was decreasing, though there was more pressure from invading Germanic tribesmen, and hired Germanic tribesmen were taking over the Roman army. The fall of the West Roman Empire began with the weakening of the economy.
Rome began to have serious economic troubles during the 3rd century. The soldiers began to demand more and more payment for their loyalty. Because there had been so many civil wars earlier, the emperors were too afraid to stop the increasing payment. Eventually, the Roman government had to keep making more and more coins until the coins' low silver content made them almost worthless. Because Roman money was so weak, most farmers ended up paying their taxes in goods. This made it so that it was harder and harder to be a successful farmer. This weakened the agricultural strength of the empire because they had less food, they could not reproduce as much.
The failing economy made many people worried about their livelihoods and how they would survive. This worry caused people to be more likely to move out of Rome and to somewhere more stable. Farmers would often leave their lands or abandon their farms because of the high taxes and the depletion of the soil. The soil was getting depleted of nutrients, making it harder to produce food. The farmers who were left were then given a bigger burden and taxed more, and felt even greater pressure to leave. Eventually, not enough food was being produced to support the population, and this led to food becoming more expensive. Expensive food drove many people into poverty and discouraged people from having children. Impoverished people often died of malnutrition or starvation. This cycle continuously decreased the population. Along with this internal cycle leading to decreased population, Germanic tribesmen would come and raid areas, forcing people to flee their homes and abandon their land. Because of the decrease in population, the Roman army was unable to find enough Roman recruits. This led them to hire Germanic tribesmen. The tribesmen were unwilling to fight using Roman techniques, making the army less cohesive than the Eastern Roman Empire's army. It also made them less cohesive than the other Germanic tribes. The Eastern Roman Empire also hired Germanic tribesmen. However, the Eastern Roman Empire was able to purge themselves of the tribesmen by killing them or bribing them to attack other areas. The Western Roman Empire, on the other hand, did not have the power or the money to do this, and instead the tribesmen gained power within the army. The tribesmen held higher positions of power in the Western Roman Empire than in the Eastern Roman Empire, which allowed them to demand more land and let more Germanic tribesmen in.
The western half of the Roman Empire was particularly vulnerable to invasion from Germanic tribesmen. It had to protect itself from invasions both on the Rhine and the upper Danube, which would altogether stretch for 1,000 miles. The east also had to deal with invasions, but only had to protect from the 500 miles of the lower Danube. On top of this, tribesmen were becoming more of a threat as there were many political and agricultural advantages within their society. There was so much land to cover that oftentimes tribesmen could just walk in while the army was in another part of the frontier fighting another tribe. Other times, the army just let in whole tribes as opposed to fighting them. The West problems were only made worse by the Huns forcing Germanic tribesmen into Rome. When the Visigoths were forced into move to the east half while trying to escape the Huns, the east pushed the Visigoths into Italy. This forced the West to pull their troops from the frontier to go deal with them. While the troops were gone, more tribes entered the empire. Once these tribes were in, they looted and raided, which caused there to be less taxes for the empire to draw on. This led to the military becoming weak, and because the military was weak, it wasn't effective as keeping out tribesmen, and therefore more got into the empire. This started a continuous cycle of tribesmen entering, looting, and a weakened military, and more tribesmen entering.
Many cities and villages had been raided by the Germanic tribesmen, and this created lots of fear and danger for farmers. The farmers would often flee and seek protection elsewhere. This left large areas of land empty and ready to be claimed. Powerful government bureaucrats would take over the land for themselves. The reason they could do this was that because the economy was so weak and they were compensated by being exempt from taxes. Because of the dangers of governments, Germans and tax collectors, many small landowners would give the bureaucrats their land in exchange for protection and work on the villas. These people eventually became serfs. The villas eventually became completely independent and self-sustained, and were their own little kingdoms.
Of course, the fall of the Roman Empire wasn't completely unique. Factors that contributed to its fall have assisted in the decline of other empires as well. Let's take a look at Persia. In the 6th century BCE, a man named Darius the Great came to power. With Mesopotamia recently conquered, he constructed roads to enhance communication and organized Persia by standardizing weights and measures. Most notably, he divided the empire into many provinces, assigning satraps to rule over them, as there was no way a single person could handle ruling such a large area. Eventually, however, Darius died. There wouldn't be another decent emperor after him. At the same time, the satraps became more and more powerful, working less out of loyalty to the emperor and more for personal gain. After a while, the empire turned into what was essentially a collection of smaller kingdoms, with the satrap ruling over each, and an emperor unable to control them. In Rome, a similar thing happened with serfs and villas. Poor farmers gave their land to richer bureaucrats to work for them and avoid the rising tax rates. Eventually, these villas became independent little kingdoms, and Rome's emperor had no way of regaining control.
The Roman Empire was once powerful, but it stopped conquering and split. The Roman Empire began to disintegrate due to weakened economy, decrease in population, increased pressure from Germanic tribesmen, and the barbarization of the army that cycled until the Western Roman Empire ceased to be. The Western Roman Empire was not unique in the way it fell, as it shares some similarities with the fall of Persia.